Hello everyone. Before we dive in, be sure to drop your thoughts, feelings, and lessons in the comments below. Like the video and subscribe so you never miss stories like this. Let's get into it. The cruelest thing Simone ever did to me happened in a packed rooftop bar in downtown Baltimore. A guy in a designer jacket asked if I wanted to join their table, and before I could answer, Simone laughed and said, "He can't even afford to be up here." Then she turned to me, eyes flat, smile sharp, and added, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Marcus, stop pretending. You're not my type. You're a struggle." People stared like I was a joke she told. I remember the sting of condensation on my palm from the cheap beer I paid for. Here's how it happened. I met Simone at a friend's cookout in Edmondson Village when we were both in our early 20s. She had that kind of confidence that made her seem like she belonged anywhere. Heels in the grass, hair perfect, laugh easy. I was the opposite, steady, careful, always doing the math in my head. At the time, I was working nights as a warehouse supervisor and taking community college classes during the day, trying to crawl out of a life that felt like it was pre-written for me. Simone said she liked ambition, and I believed her. Our first few months were simple. I'd pick her up in my old Accord. We'd get carry out from a corner spot on North Avenue, and we'd sit in the car talking until the windows fogged. She'd tell me about her office job, the coworkers who annoyed her, the way she wanted more. I'd tell her about my shifts, my classes, my plan to move into supply chain management. Sometimes she'd lay her head on my shoulder and say I made her feel safe. When she kissed me, it was warm and unhurried, like she wasn't in a race. The shift happened when she started spending more time with two friends from her office, Kayla and Bria. They were always dressed like they were stepping into someone else's life. Brunch pictures, bottle service, trips to Miami. They'd talk about men like men were upgrades. He has a Benz. He has a condo. He flies me out. Simone started repeating their lines, first as jokes, then as little tests. "When are you going to get a better car?" she'd ask, smiling. "You don't want me looking basic, right?" I tried to stay patient. I was working hard, saving, building credit, making real steps. I'd show her my budget spreadsheet like it was proof of devotion. She'd glance at it and say, "That's cute," like my effort was a child's drawing. When we went out, she'd order the most expensive thing on the menu without looking at prices, then act bored when I flinched. "A man should be able to provide," she'd say, not even meeting my eyes. It was never one big insult. It was a slow tightening. The first public humiliation was at a fancy restaurant in Harbor East. I'd saved 2 weeks for that dinner because she'd mentioned wanting a real date. When the server asked about wine, I said we'd stick to water. Simone's smile hardened. She turned to the server and said, "Actually, bring something nice. He'll figure it out." Then she looked at me like I'd failed a quiz. I paid, but my hand shook when I signed the receipt. Outside, she said, "If you can't keep up, don't waste my time." I should have walked away then. Instead, I doubled down like effort could fix disrespect. I started picking up overtime and applying to every decent job posting I could find. Simone watched me grind like it was background noise. Meanwhile, her social circle widened into men who wore cologne that filled rooms and talked about weekend flights like they were errands. At parties, Simone would drift away from me toward those men, leaving me holding her purse like I was hired help. When I asked what was happening, she'd say, "Relax, you're being insecure." The rooftop bar incident wasn't the last, just the one that burned in my memory. After she embarrassed me, she didn't apologize. She said, "I'm just being honest." 2 weeks later, she posted a photo on Instagram in a stranger's Lamborghini, sunglasses on, captioned something about being treated right. I confronted her, and she shrugged. "We weren't married," she said. "I have options." That word, options, stuck to my ribs like a bruise. I ended things that night quietly, and she walked away like she'd been waiting for it. For a while, my life went gray and narrow. I worked, studied, slept, repeated. I stopped going out because everywhere reminded me of her laugh and the way it could turn cold. I was ashamed of how small she'd made me feel. My older cousin Jamal told me, "Don't let one person be your mirror." So I started running in the mornings around Druid Hill Park. I started lifting after work. I took the certification exams I've been putting off. I built my life like a wall, brick by brick. 2 years later, the break finally came. I landed a job with a regional logistics company in Colombia, better pay, real benefits, a manager who saw how serious I was. I learned every part of the operation, then moved into planning and contracts. I got good, quietly good. I started a small side business consulting for local vendors who needed help with inventory and shipping. It wasn't glamorous, but it grew. My first big contract came from a medical supplier, and suddenly my savings weren't just savings. They were leverage. By the time I was 30, my life looked different from the outside. I had a newer car, a townhouse in Ellicott City, and a schedule that finally let me breathe. I didn't post about it. I didn't need applause. I just liked waking up without dread, like paying bills without panic, like knowing I'd built something with my own hands. And that's when Simone reappeared. She messaged me late on a Tuesday. "Hey stranger, I was thinking about you. Are you still the same Marcus?" I should have ignored her. Instead, curiosity pulled me in like a tide. We met for coffee in Canton, neutral territory. Simone walked in wearing a soft sweater, toned-down makeup, a smile that looked practiced. She asked about my life like she was interviewing it. I kept my answers simple, but she'd already done her research. "I heard you're doing really well," she said, eyes bright. "I always knew you would." That always annoyed me. But then she reached across the table and touched my hand, and my body remembered before my mind could object. She started showing up with tenderness she'd never offered before. She texted good morning. She asked how my day went. She cooked dinner at my place, salmon, rice, something she said she learned from a YouTube chef. She laughed at my jokes like they were gifts. I told myself people can grow. I told myself we were older now, wiser. When she looked at me in my kitchen and said, "I missed you," I wanted to believe her so badly that I let my guard soften. The past didn't disappear, but it quieted. Our relationship turned sweet in a way that almost felt like a reward for surviving. We took weekend trips to D.C., walking the museums, holding hands like teenagers. We sat on my couch watching old movies, her legs draped over mine, her fingers tracing lazy circles on my palm. She told me she loved how steady I was, how I made her feel taken care of. Sometimes, late at night, she'd press her forehead to mine and whisper that she'd been wrong before, that she'd been immature. Those words hit a place in me that still ached. But even in the sweetness, the old pattern flickered. At restaurants, she'd still notice other men first. If a man walked by in a crisp suit, Simone's eyes would track him like a reflex. At parties, she'd keep her phone face down, but check it whenever she thought I wasn't looking. One night I saw a name pop up, Trent Investor, and my stomach tightened. When I asked about it, she smiled too fast. "It's nothing," she said. "He's just friendly. You're not going to start that insecure stuff, are you?" The pressure to get married started like a playful idea and hardened into a requirement. "We're not getting younger," she'd say. "I want stability. I want to be someone's wife." She'd send me ring photos, wedding venue links, pictures of her friends in white dresses. When I hesitated, she'd accuse me of not being serious. "I gave you another chance," she said once, as if she was the generous one. "Don't waste it." I told her I needed time, that I wanted to make sure we were building something real. She nodded, then brought it up again the next day. I talked to Jamal about it over barbecue at his place in Randallstown. He listened, chewing slow, then said, "If you're going to do it, protect yourself. Love is love, but paperwork is paperwork." That's when I decided on a prenup. Not as a threat, just as clarity. I built my life carefully. I wasn't going to let anyone, even Simone, treat it like a prize. When I told her, her face changed in a blink, sweet to sharp. "A prenup?" she said. "So you don't trust me?" I said calmly, "It's not about trust. It's about structure." She fought it for weeks. She cried, then got angry, then tried flirting her way around it. She said things like, "If you loved me, you wouldn't need this." I stayed steady. Eventually, she agreed, but her agreement felt like surrender, not partnership. We met with attorneys downtown, signed the documents, and she smiled for photos afterward like it was a victory. I remember thinking, if someone really loves you, they don't resent boundaries. But I was already committed emotionally, and commitment can make you ignore alarms that are screaming. We got married in early fall at a venue near Annapolis. Simple, tasteful, family present, no spectacle. My mother cried when she hugged me. Simone looked beautiful walking down the aisle, and for a moment I let myself feel pure happiness. The reception was warm, Laughter, slow dancing, my aunties arguing over who made the best mac and cheese. Simone held my hand and whispered, "We did it." That night, when we finally got home, she sat on the edge of the bed and said, "Now we're really secure." Something about her emphasis on secure landed wrong. The coldness started fast, within 2 weeks. She stopped saying good morning. She complained about my routines like they were personal attacks. "You're so boring," she'd say when I went to bed early before a workday. She started leaving the house without telling me where she was going, coming back smelling like a perfume she didn't wear for me. If I asked, she'd roll her eyes. "I don't owe you a report," she said. She began correcting me in front of people, calling me cheap when I questioned unnecessary purchases, laughing like disrespect was flirting. One night, after I'd worked a long day finalizing a contract, I came home to find Simone sitting at the kitchen island, scrolling her phone, a glass of wine beside her. She didn't look up when I walked in. I kissed her cheek. She leaned away. Then she slid her phone across the counter like it was evidence. On the screen was an article about modern marriage and ethical non-monogamy. She said, "I need options again." The same word. Options. She said it like she was ordering dinner. When I asked what she meant, she didn't blink. Open marriage. Or at least freedom. I stayed quiet long enough to hear her fully. Simone said she felt trapped and too young to be done. She said her friends told her that monogamy was a control tactic. She said successful couples didn't limit each other. Then she leaned in, voice soft like she was offering me a favor. "We can keep the marriage and still enjoy life." I asked her if she already had someone in mind. She smiled and said, "Why does that matter?" That answer told me everything. Her plan wasn't hypothetical. It was already in motion. That week, I watched instead of arguing. I went to work, came home, cooked, cleaned, asked neutral questions. Simone moved through the house like she was renting it. She started guarding her phone more carefully, but she wasn't careful enough. One morning, while she was in the shower, her phone lit up on the bedside table. A message preview appeared. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Same hotel. Grant." The contact name was saved as G. Sterling. Under it, a calendar invite. Dinner/Harbor East. My chest didn't explode. It just went cold, like someone turned off the heat. I didn't touch her phone. I didn't need to. I took note, then did what I always do when life turns uncertain. I collected facts. I checked our shared credit card statement and saw a charge at a luxury hotel in Harbor East, another at a steakhouse I'd never been to with her, another at a boutique. I screen captured the statements from my account, saved them to a folder, and emailed them to myself. At work, I asked my friend and coworker Nia if she knew a good family attorney. She looked at my face and didn't ask why. She just sent a name. Nia and I had always been friendly, the kind of coworkers who bring each other coffee when the other looks tired. She was steady, direct, and warm in a way that didn't feel performative. When my hand shook while I tried to print documents at the office, she stood beside me and quietly adjusted the paper tray. "Breathe," she said. Later, we sat in the parking lot after work, and I told her the basics without turning it into drama. She didn't insult Simone. She didn't hype me up. She just said, "You deserve peace. Handle it clean." Simone's behavior escalated when she realized I wasn't panicking. She expected anger, begging, bargaining, something that made her feel in control. Instead, I became calmer. I stopped asking where she went. I stopped checking in. I started cooking only for myself. She didn't like that. She'd pick fights over nothing. How I loaded the dishwasher, how I folded towels, how I didn't compliment her enough. Then she'd suddenly turn sweet, hugging me from behind, whispering, "Don't be distant." It felt less like affection and more like a test. Could she still pull my strings? The proof arrived in the most ordinary way. Simone left her laptop open on the dining table while she took a call outside. I walked past and saw an email chain visible on the screen, hotel confirmations, dinner reservations, and a thread titled Weekend Plan. The signature on the email read, "Grant Sterling, CEO, Sterling Development Group." A high-status man. Exactly her pattern. I didn't read everything. I didn't need to. I took a photo of the screen with my phone, then another showing the date and time. Then I walked away like I hadn't seen anything. My calm felt like armor. I met with the attorney Nia, recommended in Towson, during my lunch break. The office smelled like coffee and printer paper. The attorney, Ms. Howard, listened without interrupting. I showed her the prenup and the financial records. She nodded. Good, she said, tapping the document. This makes things simpler. She explained what I could do immediately. Separate accounts, document spending, avoid confrontation that could turn into allegations, and establish clear residency choices. She also reminded me that revenge doesn't have to be loud. The best consequence is a legal one, she said. Do it quietly. Do it right. That night, I opened new accounts and redirected my direct deposit. I didn't empty anything dramatically. I simply stopped feeding the shared pool. I paid my portion of the mortgage from my personal account and documented every transfer. I canceled the extra authorized user cards that were attached to my credit. I changed passwords, updated beneficiaries, and made copies of important documents. The work was boring and meticulous, which is exactly why it worked. Simone didn't notice at first because she was busy chasing excitement. People who live for thrill rarely pay attention to structure until it collapses. In the middle of all this, the unexpected emotional connection with Nia deepened, not in a sudden movie way, but in small, realistic moments. She'd text, "You eat today?" and I'd realize I hadn't. She'd send me a photo of her dog doing something ridiculous, and I'd laugh for the first time in days. One evening, she dropped off homemade soup at my doorstep and didn't come inside. "Not trying to complicate your life," she said. "Just trying to keep you functioning." Her kindness felt clean. It didn't ask for anything. Simone, meanwhile, started staying out later. She'd come home after midnight, heels in hand, humming like she was in a private world. While I didn't react, she got bolder. One Saturday, she announced she was going to brunch with Kayla and Bria, then posted a story from a yacht. I recognized the skyline. Inner Harbor, mid-afternoon sun. In the corner of the video, a man's hand rested on her thigh. He wore a watch that probably cost more than my first car. I saved the story before it disappeared. Not to punish her publicly, just to keep the record. The boundary change became explicit when she tried to force my compliance. She said if I didn't agree to openness, she'd make my life miserable. She said she'd tell people I was controlling. She said she'd take what she deserved. I looked at her across our kitchen and realized she wasn't talking like a partner. She was talking like an opponent. That was the moment the love I'd been protecting finally cracked. I told her evenly, "Do what you need to do." She blinked, confused. She wanted me to chase. I didn't. She started acting stranger, disrespectful in ways that felt deliberate. She called me Mr. Spreadsheet in front of my family. She mocked the way I helped my mother with her groceries. She'd sigh loudly when I talked about work, then perk up when a notification hit her phone. One evening she brought up marriage counseling, not because she wanted healing, but because she wanted a stage. "Tell the counselor you won't let me live," she said. I nodded and said we could go. Her mouth tightened. She didn't want solutions. She wanted leverage. The planned revenge formed slowly, not as a fantasy of hurting her, but as a plan to remove her access to my life with precision. I didn't want to humiliate her the way she'd humiliated me. I wanted clean consequences, legal clarity, financial protection, and a moment where she could no longer pretend I was the problem. The final public confrontation would be simple and truthful, in front of witnesses she cared about. And it would be at a family event because Simone loved appearing perfect to family. Her mask mattered more than her morals. So I waited for the right moment. That moment arrived when my mother announced she was hosting a big Sunday dinner for my aunt's retirement. Family from D.C., cousins from Philly, the whole crew. Simone immediately cared. She planned her outfit days in advance. She asked me to buy extra wine and something nice for the table because people judge. I said sure. Quietly, I invited Ms. Howard to be on standby and asked Jamal to come early. I also told Nia, not as a date, but as support, and she agreed to be nearby if I needed a ride or a calm face in the crowd. 2 days before the dinner, Simone made a mistake. She left a receipt in the pocket of her coat. Hotel parking, Harbor East, Friday night. I didn't confront her. I simply added it to the folder with everything else. That folder became the spine of my piece. Bank statements, screenshots, receipts, prenup, notes with dates. I slept better once I accepted that my job wasn't to convince Simone to love me correctly. My job was to protect myself and exit with dignity. When people say love makes you blind, what they mean is love makes you negotiate your own safety. The Sunday dinner started warm. My mother's house smelled like collard greens and baked chicken, like history. My uncles argued over football. My aunt danced in the kitchen with a wooden spoon like it was a microphone. Simone played the role perfectly, smiling, hugging, complimenting my mother's cooking, calling everyone family. If I didn't know what I knew, I might have been fooled. She leaned into me when relatives took photos, her hand on my chest like ownership. I stayed polite. I poured drinks. I listened. I waited. Calm is a kind of power when you've done your homework. After everyone ate, my mother asked for a family photo in the living room. People gathered, adjusting outfits, laughing. Simone positioned herself right beside me, chin lifted. That's when my cousin Kayla, yes, the same Kayla from Simone's office, arrived late and loud, carrying gossip like perfume. She hugged Simone and said, "Girl, I thought you'd be with Grant this weekend." She said it like a joke, but the room went quiet enough to hear the refrigerator hum. Simone's smile froze. Kayla realized too late what she'd done and tried to laugh it off, but the damage was already blooming. Simone snapped in a crisis mode. She squeezed my arm hard, nails digging in, and hissed, "Say something." I looked around at my family, faces shifting from confusion to suspicion. My mother's eyes searched mine like she was begging for a simple explanation. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't deliver a speech. I said calmly, "Everyone, give me 1 minute." Then I turned to Simone and asked, evenly, "Do you want to tell them who Grant is, or should I?" She swallowed, eyes shiny, and said, "This isn't the time." I nodded. "Actually," I said, "it is." I stepped to the side table where my folder sat under a stack of mail I'd brought earlier. I opened it and pulled out only what mattered. The prenup, the hotel charges, the screenshot showing the CEO's name, and the odd story I'd saved. I didn't wave it around like a trophy. I handed it to Jamal first, then to my mother. I said, "Simone asked for an open marriage after our wedding. She already had someone lined up. I've been documenting it and handling it legally." My aunt's mouth fell open. Simone's face drained, then flushed, then hardened. Simone tried to flip the script like she always did. She said I was emotionally unavailable. She said I worked too much. She said she felt lonely. My mother looked at her and said, very quietly, "Then you talk to your husband. You don't disrespect him." That sentence hit Simone harder than any yelling would have. She glanced around, realizing the room wasn't hers to control. Her eyes landed on me with a new kind of fear. The mask was off. And the thing about masks is that once people see the straps, they can't unsee them. Simone demanded we talk privately. I agreed, on the porch, where the air was cold enough to keep us honest. She said she didn't mean for it to get out like that. Not that she didn't do it, just that she didn't want consequences. She said Grant was just fun, that I was safe, that I should be grateful she married me at all. I listened without interrupting. When she finished, I said, "I'm filing tomorrow." Her eyes widened. "You can't," she said automatically, like she believed my life belonged to her. I said, "I already did the paperwork. You'll be served this week." She panicked fast. She said she'd change. She said she'd stop talking to Grant. She promised counseling, church, whatever I wanted. Then, when I didn't move, her face tightened into anger. "You think you're better than me now," she snapped. "You're just mad because I have options." I said, "You do. And so do I." That line wasn't a threat. It was a fact. She tried to slap the folder out of my hand, but I stepped back. Inside, my family watched through the window, not because they wanted drama, but because they wanted to know I was okay. The next morning, I met Ms. Howard and filed. I moved out that same day, not in a rush, not in chaos. I took my essentials, my documents, my laptop, and a few boxes of personal items. Jamal helped load the car, while Simone paced in the doorway, calling me names that sounded like desperation. I didn't argue. I changed the locks of the townhouse legally after confirming my rights and filing the appropriate notice. I set up communication through attorneys only. I blocked Simone's access to my accounts. I paid my obligations and documented everything. Quiet, practical moves, like removing oxygen from a fire. Simone's first consequence was immediate. Her lifestyle collapsed. She tried using the joint card at a boutique, and it declined. She called me screaming. I didn't answer. She sent a paragraph-long text alternating between insults and pleas. Ms. Howard received it instead. Simone tried showing up at my office. Security escorted her out. She tried calling my mother. My mother told her to stop and hung up. It wasn't revenge by violence. It was revenge by boundary, by refusing to participate in a story where I was the one expected to swallow humiliation forever. Grant Sterling, the CEO, was not the rescuer Simone imagined. Once the situation became inconvenient, he disappeared like a light switched off. She texted him nonstop. He didn't respond. I didn't know this because I was spying. I knew it because Kayla, embarrassed and guilty, told my cousin that Simone had been crying at work, saying Grant ghosted. The fantasy was built on secrecy and thrill. Once consequences showed up, the thrill died. Simone had chased high-status men for years, but she'd never considered that high-status men don't always stick around when the bill arrives. Through all of it, Nia stayed a steady presence. She didn't celebrate Simone's pain. She didn't push herself into my life. She simply showed up in small ways. Coffee left on my desk, a reminder to eat, a quiet walk after work along the Patapsco when my mind wouldn't settle. One evening, we sat in her car outside a grocery store, rain tapping the windshield, and I admitted that I felt foolish for giving Simone so many chances. Nia said, "You didn't fail. You learned. There's a difference." Her voice didn't judge me. It lifted me. The divorce process wasn't dramatic. It was paperwork and timelines. Simone tried to challenge the prenup, claiming she didn't understand, but her signature and attorney notes said otherwise. She tried claiming I was emotionally abusive, but she had no evidence, and my documented communication stayed calm and structured. The court cared about facts, not theatrics. Simone's legal fees piled up quickly. That's the part people don't think about. Chaos costs money. Stability costs less. I stayed stable. I kept going to work, kept running in the mornings, kept my life boring in the best possible way. The romantic part of my life with Simone didn't vanish from memory overnight. There were nights I remembered her laughing in my kitchen, the soft way she used to lay her head on my shoulder, the warmth of our early trips. I had to grieve the version of her I kept hoping she'd become. But grief is easier when you stop lying to yourself. Simone didn't turn cold after the wedding out of nowhere. She simply stopped pretending. She believed marriage secured her access to my resources and my patience. When she realized it didn't, she treated me like an enemy. That truth brought me peace. The final confrontation, my planned one, came at my aunt's retirement celebration, but the real payoff wasn't her embarrassment. It was my clarity. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't try to win Simone back. I simply held up the facts in front of the people she valued and let her explain herself. That's what she didn't expect. Not that I'd be cruel, but that I'd be calm. She'd always relied on my emotions to distract from her actions. When I refused to provide that distraction, she had nothing to hide behind. Weeks later, Simone sent one last message that reached me through the attorney. She wanted to talk like adults, wanted to remember the good, wanted closure. I understood the impulse. Closure is a softer word for control. I declined. My closure was in my routines. Waking early, making coffee, going to work, coming home to a quiet space I controlled. I didn't need Simone to understand me. I needed my life back. I began furnishing my new apartment slowly, choosing things that felt like me. Simple, clean, intentional. Every choice felt like a small reclaiming. Around that time, Nia and I shifted from support to something gentler and real. It wasn't a sudden declaration. It was a hand held a little longer during a walk. It was her laughter at my dry jokes. It was a late dinner after a long day where the conversation felt easy, not like a test. One evening, we cooked together at my place. Nothing fancy, just pasta and vegetables. And music played low. When she leaned in and kissed me, it didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like relief. Like finally being with someone who didn't see love as a transaction. Simone heard about Nia, of course. Someone always talks. She showed up again, this time a grocery store parking lot. Eyes glossy, voice sharp. She said I moved on too fast. She said I was heartless. I listened, then said, "Simone, you were moving on while we were married." She flinched like that fact hit her for the first time. She tried to blame me again, but her voice lacked conviction. She wasn't fighting for love. She was fighting for the version of herself that looked like she'd won. And she couldn't win if I was at peace. The most satisfying karma wasn't watching Simone struggle. It was watching myself stay steady. I used to think strength was proving you could endure anything. Now I know strength is choosing what you will not endure. Simone's pattern, flirting, chasing, disrespect, was never about me being not enough. It was about her needing constant validation and treating people like stepping stones. When I stopped being a stepping stone and became a wall, she panicked. That panic didn't heal her. It simply revealed her. And once revealed, she couldn't charm her way back into a life she'd already damaged. My family stopped asking about her. The first few weeks they'd check in, worried, angry, protective. Then they saw my calm. My mother hugged me one day and said, "I'm proud of how you handled yourself." That mattered more than I expected. Simone had spent years implying I wasn't worthy until I had money. My family's pride reminded me I had always been worthy, and my broke stages, my struggling stages, my building stages. Money changed my options, yes, but it didn't change my character. Simone never loved my character enough to respect it. She loved what it could purchase. Sometimes I still think about that rooftop bar, the way she said I couldn't afford to be there. The funny part is, later, when I could afford anything, she still couldn't afford loyalty. That's the real cost she never calculated. I don't say that with bitterness. I say it with the calm clarity that comes after you stop romanticizing someone who hurts you. Simone taught me what humiliation feels like. She also taught me what boundaries can do. She thought marriage would lock me in. Instead, it gave me the legal framework to walk out clean. People asked if I ever wanted to get back at her more. They asked if I wanted to expose her publicly online, ruin her reputation, make her suffer. I didn't. I've learned that the loudest revenge usually keeps you chained to the person you claim you're done with. My revenge was the opposite: disconnection. A life so steady and full that her chaos couldn't reach it. I didn't need to destroy her. I needed to remove her access to me. The consequences came from her own choices. I simply stopped cushioning the impact. The day the divorce finalized, I took myself to a small waterfront spot in Annapolis, the same area where we got married. Not to relive pain, but to close the loop. I sat on a bench, watched the boats cut through the water, listened to the wind moving through the masts. I felt sadness, yes, but also a quiet pride. I had loved someone deeply and still chosen myself when that love became unsafe. That's a lesson I wish I'd learned earlier, but I'm grateful I learned it at all. Some people never do. That night, Nia and I went for a late walk. She didn't ask me to talk about Simone. She didn't ask me to prove anything. She just held my hand and matched her pace to mine. Under a streetlight, she looked up at me and said, "You're allowed to be happy." I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that until my throat tightened. We stood there for a moment, not kissing, not performing, just existing in a calm that felt earned. I thought about how love should feel: safe, mutual, steady. I promised myself I'd never confuse intensity with devotion again. Simone chose men with money over me, then married me when I got it, then turned cold because she thought the contract was complete. She didn't expect that I'd read the fine print of my own life and walk away with dignity intact. The planned revenge wasn't cruelty. It was precision, documentation, boundaries, legal structure, and a single moment of truth in front of witnesses she cared about. After that, everything fell into place the way consequences tend to do when you stop interfering with them. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just free and finally peaceful. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.